Hello everyone, welcome to video 26 of my Claude series. Today we are going to learn about how to use Claude for a big repo. Earlier we have seen for legacy codebase, now we will see for any codebase but which is very big. So let us think about a scenario where we have a 50,000 or even 50 lakhs line of monorepo with zero Claude configuration. So I asked it to add one endpoint to the payment service. Before it writes a single line, it already pulls analytics service internal and 40,000 lines of gRPC code into our context window, which is a waste. So to solve it, I have added a .claudeignore file, a two-level claude.md and scope our session to services/payments where our payment service lies. So the same request, but now Claude reads only what it needs and answers it in one pass. That 20 minutes of one line setup turning a monorepo that chokes itself into 20 services and each behaves like a small focus project. This is my real monorepo with Gradle multi-project setup in my real terminal. Nothing is cleaned up. So without wasting time, let's get started. We will be discussing about what are the tools available for monorepos to work it perfectly with Claude. So first is we will understand the problem. The problem is the context pollution. As I discussed, a 500k line monorepo has build directories, generated protobuf and 20 services. Without configuration, Claude burns context on code you don't care about and it hits your limits on the Claude code. So what we need to do is we need to skip the noise by having a .claudeignore. So claudeignore is what works exactly like .gitignore, if you guys know. We place it at the repo root to exclude build output, generated code, vendor directories and whatever we want to exclude. That is the first step. Second is architecture briefing using claude.md. So I have told in my previous video how to write a claude.md. Basically we put a root claude.md for the global monorepo map and service level claude.md in each service. Claude read both global context plus local focus. And last is the project setting where we define the size and exclusion caps. So max file size blocks minified bundles and bloated migration. File exclusions target file type patterns regardless of directory like all star.pb.go generated files, etc. Now we will see the .claudeignore first. So what we write in .claudeignore basically is the build outputs. Generally build out, target, .gradle, .build, these are the directories. Then generated code which gets generated using our Gradle or npm on whatever. Then the dependencies, vendor, node modules, IDE and OS files, large data text fixtures, also logs and local state. So if we keep this in the .claudeignore, Claude will never look into it because it has nothing to do with code. And to verify that it works, we can launch Claude and ask it to describe the project structure. It should list only source directories, not the whatever we have written in .claudeignore. Then we can see about architecture briefing using claude.md. So what we do here is first is we write a root claude.md. This is service registry table, build system commands, shared library location. And then service level claude.md inside each services where we have stack key files, run test commands and what not to modify. Then include explicit scope instruction like focus only on service directory, do not read siblings unless asked. And we can also write build command scope to the service so that Claude won't accidentally run a root level build that reveals everything. This is one example where I have written the service payment with the path services / payments and language is this. And for the build system we have written that Gradle always scope to target services, do not run Gradle build from root. For shared libraries, I have written these means these are the shared Kotlin data classes. These are source of truth for API contracts. These are shared fixtures and fix. And while working on a service, focus only on the service directory. Do not read sibling services unless explicitly asked. Once we do this claude.md, if we spend like 20-30 minutes on it, and every Claude session in the repo gets sharper. The model is not the bottleneck, the configuration is. If we see that we are still having issues, we can modify this claude.md configuration file. Now we will see some complex configuration in this slide. So it is scoped session where we say that one module at a time should be read by Claude. So even with ignore files in a 20 service monorepo, you want Claude explicitly scope to one module per session. So to do that, what we do is launch Claude from inside the service directory, so that it treats the CWD as the project root and scopes reads naturally. So this is first step, launch from service directory. Second is set max file size to block minified JS bundles and bloated generated SQL migrations. So we will set the max file size also, so that it doesn't read all those SQL migration and JS bundles. Third is we use file extension for file type pattern that apply everywhere, like all star.pb.go generated go protobuf files. And fourth is for batch automation, spawn one Claude innovation per service with CWD. So each gets its own context window, no cross contamination. And this is one example where we have .claude/settings.json. We write the model, max file size and file exclusion we write here. And then how do we launch scope to one service? We go to that service and then ask Claude and then the prompt, so that it launches from this particular service. Then subagent per service, this also we can do if we are working on very big project. So what we do is, for each services in the service directory, we spawn an agent, and in that agent we write a one page technical overview, cover what it does, comments, deps and run it, and then write it into a direct service name and overview.md. So it basically launches subagent per service, and this is an example of what it does, but we can write anything whatever we want. And if we have this scales linearly. So 20 service means 20 context window. Subagent per service is the right architecture for bulk automation. If we have same kind of work in each of the directory, we can have this subagent, and we can have subagent per service.